Definitely, definitely. I mean, you're dropping so many jewels right now. We're loving it. Let's go back to ancient Kemet or Egypt. I used to go by the name of Kemet Prince One. My awakening actually
Okay.
began with the great author Anthony T. Browder. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He wrote the book Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization.
Absolutely. Of
And
course. Of
and
course.
he's a master teacher in his own right. So that's how I started to wake up. Once I realized that it all came from ancient Egypt, it was a wrap. And I know you just came back from Egypt. What was that like, brother?
Man, I just I just had a high level conversation with a chematologist, man, a chemet master. He was the father of the Ankh, is what we call him, because he was the first person to bring the Ankh to America, right in the 50s, in the 60s, and his name is Baba Haru. And so we had a long three. It was still probably the longest high level conversation that I've shot thus far, and it was all about Kemet. And when I went to Egypt, what is now known as Egypt, Kemet was a representation of the land of the blacks. That's what Kemet means, and because the soil was so rich, is what actually allowed them to have great agriculture and feed the people, right? But when I was out there, what I learned specifically, even about economics and why they were able to have systems, and what we admire the most about Egypt, and what most people don't think about, is their ability to have unity and unify systems of thought over courses of time. So when we think about time in America, or if we go back to European colonization and conquering, we would look at, you know, um, instead of conquering, spaces, they learn how to conquer times, right? Conquering spaces is limited and it always expires. So it's like somebody on their block, this is my space, stay off my street. Where somebody started to think, no, I need to conquer time. This is my next 10 years. This is my next 100 years. So they started to write down and put things on papyrus, right? Paper, their plans and their ideas, right? And then people after them followed it throughout time, right? Because the paper is actually the greatest incantation, right, ever to exist. It's where we didn't just speak things into existence, we were able to ritualize and write things into existence, right? And that's where we was able to manufacture the crystallization of thought and pass that on, right, as egregore rituals. So, the ancient Kemetic people and the Egyptians understood this power. So one thing that they understood greatly is the power of understanding, the stars, the cosmology, and understanding agriculture, and understanding the river, and the connection between agricultural times and when it's time to harvest. And so by studying that, they were able to feed their people. And by feeding their people, the people were then able to become unified in the collective consciousness to bring out the thoughts of building the great civilizations that we now marvel at. But if you can't feed the people, right, then we can't bring out any unified collective consciousness, because we're worried about the small, low level details, eating and shelter, right? So this is where we at right now. So in Egypt, I learned that lesson is that we're in a rat race, right? So we can't get in the God race, right? Because we're worrying about things that God would not worry about, which is food, clothing, and shelter, right? And they solved that problem for their people, right? And that's when they was able to actualize things that we can't do today because we have too much poverty, right? And
Right,
so
right.
the the thing that I admired the most, I went to go visit Karnak, which is one of the most oldest ancient religious sites in the world, and each king and pharaoh added to Karnak as they existed as their lineage. So they would build something, and the next coming, and they would build something. So it was built over time, and that's the beautiful thing about Egypt is everything that you see was built over time. It wasn't
Right,
one
right.
ruler; it was a continuation of ideas that were then installed, right? And one of the most famous pharaohs of that time was the 19-year-old king, Tutankhamun. And we had the great ability to go visit him, and his body was still there on display. And this is how you know these were Africans, because only Africans get dug up and put on display. We don't see that happen in no other parts of the world where the bodies and the bones are then put on display, right? We only do that for us. It's like a afterlife crucifixion, you know. But when I looked at the walls there in Egypt, it was all brown people with braids and nappy hair, and you know they were practicing yoga and comedic sciences and technology, and it was like, wow. I don't need a history book. I don't need a scholar. I don't need anybody to tell me who these people were. The evidence is in front of me. Only a people that wants to rewrite history need a scholar to tell them that, am I seeing what I'm seeing is real? It's only because you don't like what you're seeing,
Some
right?
people say, Egypt was the golden age, of milk and honey. The two questions arise: how did they fall? And the next question: how can we get back up to that level? Is it possible to? Because till this day, they still can't build pyramids. They can't build the Great Pyramid. People don't know how they were able to build the Great Pyramids. And right now, I know energy can never be destroyed. The gods are still walking amongst us. What's stopping us right now from doing the same thing that they were doing thousands of years ago? What's the missing link right now?
Well, I would say, like I said, the first thing is you can't, listen, they call those people slaves, which comes from the Slavic people, the Slavs, right? And our idea of slavery is completely different because we look at chattel slavery and we like, oh, those people were beaten and raped and tortured. No, that's not what was going on, right? Those people were in servitude and in debt to their country because they were feeding these people and housing these people, and they lived a life, right, that is greater than most people that's living in poverty in America today. And so by solving the poverty problem, solving the housing problem, they focus on the Great Pyramid, like Maslow's law, right? When you can solve that problem of, food, clothing, and shelter, and they're not in a rat race, they can get to actualization, right? We have an advancement of, technology today, but it's spiritual technology that's missing. There's certain things human beings cannot do unless they're unified. There's certain things that human beings cannot do until we get rid of poverty, right? We can't, it's certain, like civilizations cannot rise higher than its woman, right? That's just a fact.
Teach.
And
Right,
so
right.
when there was meiotic law of the land, that was a recognition of patriarchal and matriarchal, right? There was Oset, Osiris, there was Isis, right? In America, in these systems that we have today, there is no recognition of the woman, right? And so unification of the human family is a technology within itself that manifests as different realities, right? And so we thinking about outer technologies that, oh, I wonder what the Egyptians had. They had unity, right? We have to think about what problems do we solve, and how does that free up human beings to do things that we never could do, because we're putting so much mental energy into solving the problems and trying to correct the issues that we can't even get to the reality of the new earth, right? And
Right,
so
right.
old earth looks better than present earth because they didn't have the same problems.